Oh, the Fitger's brewery complex on Superior Street was nearly lost to history in the early 70s. Since then, the building has been repurposed, but mementos of its brewery years are there for those who look for them. Dave Anderson shows us some of those treasures in this week's Holding On to History.
August Fitger took over the Lake Superior Brewery in the early 1880s and founded a legacy and an empire and a string of buildings that have lasted more than a lifetime.
1881 was the first building built, and they actually continued construction of buildings until 1906.
Those buildings survived both Prohibition and the expansion of Interstate 35, but sat abandoned from 1972 to the early 80s. That's when Fitger's renaissance began, with a massive rehab project that involved reskinning the water tower, tuck-pointing the chimney, and rebuilding falling walls with ancient bricks baked in Esco and purchased from demolished old buildings. The renovations revealed signatures from 1906 on the walls.
Yeah, so they're the signatures of August Fitger's two children.
Other mementos of another century include names etched in roof tiles and a plaque to someone long forgotten in another nook. Now a shopping mall, Flossie Solon and Scott Vesterstein bought the complex about 30 years ago. They try to preserve the past in the historic buildings, like keeping one of the brew kettles.
This is the copper kettle, and this goes all the way down to the lower level, and the beer hole, in essence, is Fitger's salon now.
The Fitger's management team also actively collects souvenirs and stories from the brewery's past, and says even after 30 years, there are more tidbits to discover.
There are definitely still treasures out there. We have a very good collector that is out there collecting right now, and he's sharing some stories with me as well, and I'm sharing with him.
Holding on to history in Duluth, Dave Anderson, Northern News Now.
Dave, thank you. The Twin Forts' other heritage breweries still have a few buildings standing as well, but nothing to the scope of the Fitger's complex.